John Barry is a longtime member of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Shenandoah Valley. His service is titled An Argument for Beauty. He writes, "The argument developed out of an intense and ongoing period of writing when I began during the pandemic. In the summer of 2021, I set the intention to mend my long estranged relationship with God, and in a strange and spontaneous period of inspiration, I started writing a series of poems, stories that I call the Broken Poem, and other strange ideas about God. The mythic, dialogue-driven, humorous, and heartfelt stories that came through animate God, darkness, silence, light, gravity, and beauty, and what is somewhat vaguely called the forevers." John, welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Boy, I love this microphone. I don't have to look for it with my voice. It's lovely. Oops. I couldn't have picked a better place to give a talk about beauty than where we are. This is just magnificent. I always love driving up in the mountains. So, I have a question that I've been dying to ask this congregation. And depending on how you answer it, it may very well determine whether I go on with this or we just all go home early and I never mention it again. So, my question is everyone here able to name something that they think is beautiful? And please share. Snow. Okay, snow. Anyone else?
The two flutes and the harp playing that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Count.
Children. My bicycle.
All right. Online.
Mountains.
Okay.
Red.
Is anyone here unable? That's really probably more the question. Is anyone here unable to name something that they think is beautiful? No? Okay. Then we can proceed. So, what do you suppose might happen if we went out into the world and we asked every single human being on the planet that same question? Do you think that everyone we'd ask would be able to name something beautiful too? How about creatures? I've kind of heard that bears will sit and stare out at a landscape for hours, but I think that's a conversation for another day, a deep conversation for another day. So I've been giving this presentation for several years now, and I cannot stop being fascinated by the idea that to every living person on the planet, there is something in which they find beauty, even in the ugliest circumstances. Rich, poor, educated, illiterate, black, white, brown, yellow, red, happy, sad, compassionate, treacherous, unlawful, dishonest, even predatory. All people have a knowing of beauty that they never seem to need to question. Now, let me just back up for a second. I'd like you to understand that I'm not talking about the sometimes triggering small b beauty of fame and followers and glamour. I'm talking about capital B beauty. I'm talking about true beauty, the beauty of nature, the beauty of art and poetry and music, the beauty of kindness, compassion, forgiveness, generosity, courage, humor, integrity, thankfulness, love, kindfulness. Thank you, monks. It's kind of been my experience that places like this are highly attuned to what I'm talking about, so I'm sure you understand. Have you ever met anyone incapable of recognizing beauty? Be honest. It depends. How about love or God? Now I want to play a game with you. We're going to come back to beauty in a minute, but I want to tell you a story first, and we're going to play a little game. So a few years ago, when we were coming out of the pandemic, I made up this game that I wanted to play at a poetry gathering that I used to host up at the River House Arts and Music Community in Cape and Bridge, West Virginia, where my wife and I now live. Now, the idea behind it was that I wanted to take a short poem or maybe a line of poetry and separate the words on the cards, on a separate piece of paper, distribute the words, and read the words back in a random order. And I thought it might be kind of fun to see what sort of poems might rise out of that. Sounded like a good idea. So around the same time that I made up this game, I've been doing an awful lot of thinking about the strained, and as I thought of it, the complicated relationship I have had with God. And specifically the patriarchal Christian God that I'd known as a child. Now, I hadn't identified as a Christian in a very long time, but the old Sunday school image of God simply never went away. And I imagine some of you may have had that experience possibly. No matter how I tried, different spiritual paths, practices, churches like this, that sort of water-stained, yellowed, unimaginative picture of white male, bearded God was kind of stuck right here in my mind. And to be honest with you, I was sick of his face. But more than that, I was really tired of feeling separated from God by that very image, and separated by some of the same caustic ideas about God that pushed me away in the first place. So when I played this game with my poetry group, I thought I'd use a short famous quote or a line of poetry, and instead this idea came to me, and I wrote down the three words that are on this card. And can I get you to don't look at these yet. So if you don't mind distributing those, they're already kind of randomized, so just whoever gets them gets them. And as soon as everybody's got a card, we're going to begin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just call on people at random, and when I call on you, look at your word and say your word out loud. And then we're going to kind of randomly, this is a living poem. Okay, so. Oh, good idea.
I'm just kind of aiming it around. I think it should be.
Mine was God.
Uh-huh. Sue?
His.
Okay, and in the back? You.
There.
Okay.
God.
There.
God.
Sue?
Is.
All the way to the back?
Is.
Okay. And back up front?
God.
And in the back?
There.
All the way in the back?
There.
Here?
God.
There. There.
Okay. Okay, I think we get the point. How was that for you? Sometimes it makes people a little bit uncomfortable. It made me uncomfortable the first time that I played that game. But that's kind of really what poems are sometimes meant to do. They're supposed to kind of push you a little bit. And so I couldn't really explain why it was that I wrote these 3 words down, but they just seemed to work together. They kept coming up with these different ways of saying not just the same thing, but also the opposite. Because sometimes it said, is there God, or is. Anyway, you get the idea. So I'm going to follow that up because I want to read the broken poem, which was something that rose out of that. And I'll talk more about what this is about and where this came from after I read it. So, the broken poem. One day, before there even was such a thing as a day, God was bored. And because music had yet to shape itself in the tap, tap, tapping fingers of God, God began to think of a poem. And because there was only God, except for a lot of silence and darkness, which was also God, the poem went, there is God. God stood back and admired the poem, and so invented admiration, not to mention standing back from things. And saying it to darkness, darkness shrugged and said, nice. And showing it to silence, silence nodded, but said nothing at all. God looked a long time at the poem, which was way before there was such a thing as a long look for a length of time, then broke it in pieces. God handed one of the pieces to darkness, saying, here, you keep this. Then handed another to silence, mouthing, this is for you. The last word God kept for themselves. And God said, now throw your pieces down, which wasn't a thing back then. And while it was a little confusing to darkness and silence, they got the general idea. Throw your pieces down and let's see what happens. God is there, the poem read. A small smile, which always was, washed ashore the face of God. Wonderful, God said, as silence clapped one hand and the eyes of darkness shined. Let's go again. God gathered up the words, shuffled, and handed them out. Now, on the count of 3, let's toss them as high as we can. 1, 2, 3, go! And the broken words fell for about 1 billion years like leaves of future autumns. There God is, the words said. Delightful, shouted God as darkness whistled and silence beamed. Let's go again. God shuffled the words. Now about this time, which wasn't really a thing back then, gravity came by. Curiously dressed and smelling strangely of molasses, gravity held the black hat of future labors in his hands and said, here, drop them in here and I'll shake them. And shook them well, gravity did, and everyone laughed when he tossed them out like flakes of future snows. Is God there? The words blanked at their feet. God looked puzzled. Silence mumbled something inaudible. Darkness looked at his hands. Gravity filmed a nervous laughter as he was known to do, and clutching the black hat of future labors, quickly gathered the words and gave them back to God. Chukka, chukka, chukka. The words whirled in God's hands. Come on, baby, Mama needs a new pair of shoes. God was not unused to games of chance. 7 come 11, all God's children go to heaven. God boomed as the words rattled like bones in a tomb. Is there God? God quickly snatched them up and blowing into the nave of their palm, let the pieces fall. Wind, had it been a thing back then, would have held its breath. God, there is. The poem read. Darkness stared. Silence raised a finger to gravity's lips. God looked pleased as the four friends admired in wonder a feather from the black hat of future labors had fallen between two words, inventing the comma. Well now, would you look at that? That's a keeper, God chuckled, smiling at darkness and silence, then setting the black hat of future labors back on gravity's head. What about making the world? Oh, goodness. So, in the midst of all my contemplating about the beginning of my relationship with God, and under the influence of wonderful poets like Mary Oliver and John O'Donohue and Meister Eckhart, and probably under the influence of a little too much weed, the broken poem just sort of fell out of the ceiling one hot August day. And I love the poet, philosopher David Whyte's encouragement to ask beautiful questions. And as I thought about where and when that image began, it reminded me of the Judeo-Christian idea of the beginning, the beginning. And with that in mind, I asked myself what turned out to be not only a beautiful question, but also a life-changing question. I asked, what can I say for sure about the beginning besides the question of whether God was there or not? And I thought about it, and I said, well, there'd be a whole lot of darkness and a whole lot of silence. And when I said that, this wave of relief just washed over me that almost brought me to tears, because in that moment I thought, well, okay, so if God was there, then that means God had friends. And so the broken poem and the broken poem met. And that completely threw me for a loop, because I'd never written anything like this before. I've written a lot of poetry, but I'd never written something like this. I'd certainly never written a poem with dialogue. And in some of the later pieces I wrote, there's a lot of dialogue. But it really got me thinking, so what would darkness say to the old creator? I couldn't wait to find out. And how exactly does silence communicate? And what about my old friend gravity, who I'd already been writing about for a few years? What about light? So imagining the personhood and the personality of darkness and silence and the forevers, they and God must back. Before silence, before even our old friend darkness, emptiness, the no thing except beauty. It was beautiful. No God, no darkness or silence, just emptiness and beauty. The source from which all things began. Now I want to jump ahead a few forevers. Back before you were born, when you were in your mother's womb, do you suppose the sound of your mother's heartbeat may have been beautiful to you? Just go there for a minute. Can you think of a time, any time in your life, when you would have been unable to recognize beauty? What about God or love? After you were born, how complicated did love and God become? Did anything become complicated or conditional about beauty? Now let's just clarify that sometimes all the beauty does is make you glad. We never have to learn beauty like we do our numbers and our language and our gods. Growing up in these Blue Ridge Mountains, no point did anyone ever have to teach me that they're wondrous and beautiful mountains. No one ever had to teach you what a beautiful day looks like to you. A rainy day might be a beautiful day to you. Beauty is the most real thing we know. I mean, do you ever scroll through Facebook wondering where reality begins and where it ends? I do, and it scares me to death. That's not beauty. Beauty is never needed to justify itself in a book. There are no versions of a beauty Bible to debate or obfuscate. And just like the way our bodies unconsciously put good food, clean water, and air to use for our physical survival, is it so far-fetched to see the same in beauty? Not abstractly, not metaphorically, but physically, emotionally, and spiritually indispensable for humans to exist on this or any other planet for that matter. Essential for other creatures too, but I think that humans are really the only ones who forget that. Beauty is the most real thing you know, and you've known beauty forever. Now, it's not a question of what beauty is. What is beautiful is whatever you think it is. Some people think golden toilets are beautiful. Well, it's not my thing. I've heard it's a thing. For some, beauty is simple. For some, it's incredibly complex. For some, beauty is the exact opposite of what is beautiful to another. I have a friend up at UCSB who told me that the most beautiful thing he ever witnessed was the carcass of a large deer being consumed by this writhing mass of maggots. Lauren will tell you, Reverend Lauren will tell you, we're a little cracked up there at UCSB, but Raymond's a biology and anatomy professor and just kind of an all-around strange dude, but but he told me that, and I totally believe him. He never lies to me. So, setting aside Raymond's idea about what beauty is, the question that I'm asking, that I've been asking myself for the past several years, is really not what beauty is, but who. And yes, there are people who live in the most unbeautiful circumstances, unsafe, unloved, unknowing of God, but never unknowing of beauty, if only in memory. I think beauty makes love possible. I do not think beauty is God. I think beauty is someone far older, far wiser, and far less complicated than God. But I also believe that God knows beauty best. And for all this omnidemocratic omniscience of beauty, beauty demands nothing except that we pay attention. That's it. No rules, no dogma, no creed, no 10 commandments of beauty. Beauty is not telling you to be good. Beauty only asks you to pay attention, to listen, to feel, to smell, to taste, and to beautify the world with your heart, your imagination, and your eye. Beauty isn't saying you have to be woke, but you do need to be awake. And that's it. And all it takes is to simply live. The universe went to great pains to ensure that you and everyone you know is known to beauty. That in and of itself is a profound achievement, and it's not to be taken for granted. If our ability to experience and be in relationship with beauty is just some obscenely generous door prize for being human, why would the universe bother unless it was absolutely essential to our survival? And from an evolutionary standpoint, when I think of the representation of humans transforming, I know you've all seen this image, humans transforming, from stooped over, looking at the ground, primates to these upright, clear-eyed gods. It kind of makes me wonder if it wasn't beauty that lifted our eyes and straightened our spines in the first place. All those bent over people, looking up at the landscape, looking up at the sun and the sky. And so what's the reward for living and paying attention to beauty? More beauty. And that's all. And that's enough. Beauty does not promise salvation. And that's exactly why it saves us over and over and over again. Everything you always wanted God to be, beauty is. Everything you always wanted God to be, beauty is. If the broken poem was, maybe it was just an answer to my invitation to mend my personal relationship with God. And if that's the case, that's great. I'm happy it worked out. I'm very relieved that it worked out. But I think there was more to it, which is why I'm standing here, but that's not really for me to decide. That's for you. My message is really pretty simple. Insist on beauty in your life. Insist on beauty in your surroundings, in your work, in your home, in your hopes and dreams, in your community, and in the way that you are with family and friends. And when you do go out into the world, remember Mary Oliver's words, you do not have to be good. Be beautiful instead. What a world we might have had if our schools and our families told us that instead of being good. Thank you.